We now know Lou Lamoriello won't be back, but what should the fate be of head coach Patrick Waugh? We'll talk about why he should and why he shouldn't be back and who will be most affected by his departure if it happens. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. And we have a busy show today, but it's going to center around one thing. Patrick Waugh. Should he stay or should he go? What are the advantages of keeping him? What are the advantages of letting him go? What did he do well? What did he do poorly? What players will be affected by his departure? We're going to break all of that down for you today on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. And I want to start with some of the reasons that maybe you want to keep Patrick Waugh. And I think part of it is this. When he first came to the New York Islanders, we saw a jump in the team's play, especially, their last, let's say, 9 or 10 games. They went on a big streak. They squeaked into the playoffs. You could see that there was a jump in the overall way the team reacted. Now, that was a year ago. This year, it just did not necessarily seem to mesh as well. And part of it is this, and everydayers will recall I've talked about this occasionally on the show when I discussed some of the tensions between the now departed Lou Lamoriello and Patrick Waugh. Patrick Waugh was like a gourmet chef who wasn't allowed to pick his own ingredients. And it was like Lou Lamoriello brought in, food that Patrick Waugh didn't necessarily want to cook with, or that the ingredients didn't play to his strengths. So you look at this Islanders team. Patrick Waugh wants to play a faster, more offensive-minded game. And the Islanders roster was more geared toward a slower defensive first. You build from the goal out. You minimize the other team's chances and you win 2-1 or 3-2 or 1-0. If the roster that the Islanders had this past season was going to have to be involved in, trying to win a game by 7-6, it wasn't going to happen all that often. And what ended up happening is you basically had, round pegs and you're trying to force them into a square hole. It didn't fit. So, Waugh wants more speed. The Islanders were one of the slower teams in the league. Waugh worked really well with players in juniors, where he won a championship as the owner, general manager, and coach of, a team in the Quebec League. So, and yet he had a veteran team that was slow afoot relative to the rest of the teams in the league. He didn't have a team that was conducive to his style. And so it is difficult in that sense to judge what kind of a job Patrick Waugh is capable of doing for the New York Islanders, because he hasn't really gotten the kind of team that plays to his strengths. And that is a great unknown going forward. It is partially a positive because it may be an explanation for why this team did not do well this year. Injuries are also part of the mix, even if realistically, like I said, even if this team stayed 100% healthy, their ceiling remained barely making the playoffs and almost certainly exiting in the first round like they did, a year ago and like they did the year before that. So it is a great unknown. Now, another thing I think working in Patrick Waugh's favor is that he's Patrick Waugh. He has respect from you bring in a player, whether it's a free agent, a trade, through the draft. Patrick Waugh is going to have that player's respect initially, especially because he is one of the greatest goalies of all time. He won a Jack Adams Award as Coach of the Year with the Colorado Avalanche. He's gotten the Avalanche to the playoffs. He's gotten the Islanders to the playoffs. We know that he is capable of, he has a great hockey legacy and a great name. And we know his type of leadership tends to be emotional and passionate and fiery. And again, you would need to bring in players who respond well to that kind of coaching and leadership. We know Patrick Waugh likes to mix things up, whether it's his line combinations or his defensive pairs. He likes to pull his goalie early. He is willing to take those kind of gambles. And if things are not working out, if the team is struggling, you'll see changes. Maybe not in the lineup because the Islanders didn't have the depth to really enforce that. But certainly we saw almost an infinite number of line combinations, even if it was just for a shift or two over the course of the season. So there are things working in Patrick Waugh's favor, and there are things that certainly do not work in his favor as well. And I mean, Patrick Waugh, there is a logic that says you didn't give the guy a fair shake under Lou Lamoriello. And even just eliminating the tension between Lou and Patrick Waugh and having a general manager who will work with Waugh to get him what he needs to succeed in his style would give, I wouldn't say a clean slate because he already has some kind of a relationship with the players, but it would certainly change the chemistry in the locker room and in the organization when players know. It's almost like a kid with parents. If you've got two parents that are always on the same page and you ask mom a question and she says, Mom, can I go to this party? And mom says no. And if you ask dad and dad also says no, you know where you stand and you know what you have to do. Whereas if you could play them off against each other, it's a whole different story. Mom says no, you ask dad, he'll say yes, and vice versa. And I think with Waugh and Lou last year, we saw, a coach and a general manager that generally were not on the same page. And we heard, and everydayers will recall it because we reported on it when it first happened, but we heard Patrick Waugh say, "This is the team that Lou gave me." And clearly that was a fairly subtle, not too subtle, but it was a dig at the way the team was put together and how it didn't really mesh with what Patrick Waugh needed. Give Patrick Waugh a chance to work with someone who's on the same page as him. And I think we've got a different situation now. It may still mean a short leash for Patrick Waugh, that he could get onto the hot seat in a hurry, because you bring in a new general manager and, he says, okay, I'll work with Waugh. But if it's not working, if the new GM and the new coach, or the coach rather, are not getting along, then or they're not winning, that they're working together but it's not working out, I think the GM is going to want to bring in his or her own coach, and we'll see how that plays out if it ends up happening. But if Patrick Waugh stays, I think, if we get to January or February and the Islanders are floundering and not showing signs of improvement, I can't imagine it wouldn't come as a surprise, I'll put it that way, for the Islanders to say goodbye to Patrick Waugh midseason or at the end of the season, depending on how much they're struggling. But again, I think it would be a short leash, or it wouldn't take much for Waugh to be on the hot seat under those circumstances. So those are some of the positives, some of the reasons you may want to keep Patrick Waugh. But we'll also now be discussing why maybe you wouldn't want to keep him, some reasons to move on from Patrick Waugh. We're going to address that. Plus, for our Islanders birthday of the day, a center who was with the Islanders in the late 2000s through the mid-2000 teens, was nicknamed the Great Dane and was one of the best shootout specialists in Islanders history. This is an easy one. Let's see if you can guess who it is. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. You just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 to Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you could also watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required, and it's available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube. So again, it's Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Check it out today. So we talked a little bit about some of the positives for Patrick Waugh. How about some of the drawbacks? I'll add one more positive, by the way, before we get to the drawbacks. He also didn't have assistant coaches that were his guys. Okay, 2 of the 3 assistant coaches were Lou's guys, Tommy Albaline and obviously John McClain. I doubt either one of them is back now that Lou is gone. But, if Waugh stays, he gets to bring in his own people, I would think, and we go from there, and we'll see how that affects things. But now let's talk about some of the drawbacks. And I think we all saw this late in the season. There were games, especially after the trade deadline, where this team just did not emotionally seem prepared to play. And I think the most egregious example, but not the only example, was the 9-2 loss to the Rangers. It was embarrassing. This team looked like it was going through the motions and wasn't ready to play. This is a veteran team. This is a team that shouldn't need a coach to say, okay, guys, let's go get them. These are guys who should know we're playing a rival, a division rival, our crosstown rivals. We still have a slim chance at a playoff berth. This is a must-win game for us. We've got to go out there and take no prisoners. And even if we lose, we go down swinging. We didn't see that. There were too many nights where this team, or days, because matinees, as we all know, have been a problem for the Islanders for a long time, but there were too many games where this team just did not seem to have that enthusiasm and that energy. And ultimately, that falls on the coach and the players. So the coach, while maybe not primarily responsible for that, is at least partially responsible for that. And you sort of had to wonder at some point whether or not, the players had sort of checked out on Patrick Roy. We don't know the answer to that unless you're inside the locker room. But certainly some of the performances led me to believe that there were problems there. Another issue, the penalty kill and the power play. Again, yeah, you had John McClain, assistant coach in charge of power play. You had Tommy Albaline in this year as the assistant coach in charge of the PK. Both units were dreadful this year. You're not making the playoffs very often when your power play is next to last in the league, 31st out of 32 teams, only clicking at 12.6%, and your PK is only clicking at 72.2% and is also next to last in the league. Now, that is all part of the problem. And yeah, you got those assistant coaches, and they may be the ones who are working on, up close with the players on those units. But what are they doing? They're implementing and working with the head coach to do things the way he wants them to do it. And if you're the head coach, if you're the boss, and you see that the manager of one of your departments is not doing his job well, it is up to you to address that with the manager and then with the people under him to fix the problem. Well, the problem never got fixed. And yeah, part of it very well could be that the Islanders just didn't have the personnel to effectively do better. But the fact that we didn't see major adjustments, that we didn't see a significant change, it's a problem. It's a problem. And you want to see improvement over the course of the year. We didn't really see significant improvement. Yeah, the penalty kill and the power play got a smidge better at times, but it just was never even average, okay? Maybe for a game or two, but over any 10-game stretch, at best, they were below average, sometimes really below average, and sometimes just putrid. And you can't win that way. Another thing that I question about Patrick Roy, and again, you got to be inside the locker room, but it's this. There were times after games where this team just looked, they played terrible. And that Rangers loss 9-2 is, again, the freshest example in my mind, but far from the only one. And, what did he say? He said, oh, yeah, we had more than 40 shots on goal in that game, so that means we didn't quit. There were times when Roy went out of his way to defend what were inexcusably bad performances by his team. And I get it. You want to, as the coach, you're talking to the media. What he says to the media, yes, I believe in my players. We didn't quit, blah, 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 may not be the same thing he says post game when the locker room is closed off and nobody's listening. Just the players and the coach. He could go out there and tear them a new one, so to speak, and then go out to the media and say, we didn't quit. We played hard, even though we got, blown out 9-2. Okay. But then there were times when Patrick Roy, called out specific players. And there were some guys who just seemed to be his targets, whether it was Pierre Engvall, Samuel Bolduc, whether it was at times Casey Cizikas, and certainly after the return from injury, Anthony Duclair, who literally walked away from the team after being called out by Patrick Roy. And again, you want to see more consistency. If you're going to call out your team. But there were, let's just say this, Samuel Bolduc, Anthony Duclair, Pierre Engvall, Casey Cizikas. These were not the only guys who were playing some pretty bad hockey at times that cost this team games. We saw bad defensive play and giveaways by multiple veteran defensemen on this team, and they didn't get called out. We saw, forwards not back checking, and they didn't get called out publicly. Again, I don't know what happens behind closed doors, but you want to see a little more consistency in the way the coach addresses the media when talking to the players. And you want to see a post-game press conference that reflects what's going on. Because you know what? I get it. You want to defend your players to a certain extent, but you also have to have one foot grounded in reality. And, again, you don't want to call out your players to the media. You want to defend them. I get it. But when they play awful, you could even say, you know what, we didn't quit, but boy, we need to do these things better. There are ways to say it without losing credibility. And I think at times Patrick Roy stretched the boundary of credibility by the way he spoke after some games. And lastly, you want your coach and general manager to be on the same page. So if a new general manager comes in and feels like he has wants to run a different system than Patrick Roy, or has players that he wants to bring in, or his own coach that he wants to bring in, you got to defer to the GM. So the new GM will have a big say in whether or not Patrick Roy is back. All right, we've got more to get to. If Patrick Roy returns or doesn't return, who are some of the players who will be most affected? We'll talk about that, plus our Islanders birthday of the day, coming up next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices usually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you could save up to 60%. Here's what I love about Game Time. They have all-in pricing, which shows the total cost up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the app even gives you panoramic seat views, so you know exactly what to expect before you buy the tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So you look at this roster and you kind of wonder, all right, who would be most affected if Patrick Roy was not back. And I think I'm going to start with the obvious. Patrick Roy likes faster, smaller, mobile, puck-handling defensemen. And those are the guys that Lou Lamoriello brought in after injuries struck this defense. And guys like Tony DeAngelo, guys like Adam Boqvist, guys like Scott Perunovich, if the Islanders have a new coach who doesn't want those, smaller, more mobile defensemen as a point of emphasis, those guys' value to the Islanders is reduced. It changes the outlook. Same thing, I think, to an extent with Mike Riley, and we don't know whether he's back or not, but those four guys all kind of have similar molds or similar styles of play. Offensive-minded, smaller, quicker, puck-handling defensemen. And all of them, I think, would be less likely to return and play a bigger role if Patrick Roy is not back. Kyle Palmieri seemed to thrive a year ago under Roy. And look, 24 goals in 82 games, not a bad season, down 6 from the 30 he scored a year ago. But again, Mathew Barzal out of the lineup a lot of injuries. I get it to a point. But Palmieri seems to like playing under Patrick Roy, seems to be more consistent under Patrick Roy. Then you have guys who I think would kind of benefit if Patrick Roy departed. Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech played better under Barry Trotz than they did under Patrick Roy. I just don't think they fit the style as well. Pierre Engvall, Patrick Roy wanted him to play a certain way. For maybe an 8 to 10 game stretch late in the year, he turned it on a little bit. But overall, he didn't do a particularly good job of consistently playing the way his coach wanted him to play. And you could see, getting back to the fact that Roy and Lou were on different pages, Roy clearly had no need, no use for Engvall more often than not, and Lou wanted him on the roster. And so you played this game of chicken where he was called up, he was put on waivers twice, he was brought back. It was a messy situation, but ultimately, I think if Roy leaves, Engvall might benefit from, if he's not bought out, and we'll get into that throughout this busy offseason, but I think he would benefit from having a fresh slate with a new head coach. I think you could say the same about Samuel Bolduc, if he even fits remotely into the Islanders' plans anymore. I think Simon Holmstrom likes playing under Roy. Not sure if he would benefit from a coaching change, but those are the major guys who I think would be affected the most if Patrick Roy stays or goes. And it'll be interesting to see what happens and how this team builds around either Roy with a GM who's working with him, not at cross purposes with him, or with a new GM and a new head coach heading in a completely different direction. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. I think this one was fairly easy, but Thursday was the 41st birthday of former Islanders center Frans Nielsen. The Great Dane, a third-round pick of the Islanders in 2002, came over to North America in 2006-2007, and stayed with the Islanders all the way through the end of the 2015-2016 season. Finished out his career in the NHL in Detroit, played 1 year in Germany, and then hung up his skates. Nielsen, 925 games in the NHL, 167 goals, 473 points, and 166 penalty minutes. Add 4 goals, 10 points in 24 playoff games, all of those with the New York Islanders. Nielsen, not a great goal scorer, just had 2 20-goal seasons with the Islanders, but a really good two-way forward. He could play point on the power play. He could play on the second power play unit as a forward. He killed penalties. And boy, oh boy, was he dangerous on shootouts. That patented backhand move he made was a thing of beauty. One of his most memorable games as an Islander, October 25th, 2014, Islanders hosting the Dallas Stars at the Nassau Coliseum. Anders Lindback, the goalie for Dallas, Chad Johnson, the goalie for the Islanders. And in this game, with the Islanders up, in the third period, okay, Islanders trailing, and our Islanders' birthday of the day, Franz Nielsen goes to work. He scores his second goal of the year. Midway through the period, Nikolai Kulemin and Mikhail Grabovski get the assists to pull the Islanders just a little bit closer. They were down at this point by a score of, the game was tied 4-4. Franz Nielsen strikes again. 6 minutes later, Grabovski and Kulemin again with the assists. After Dallas comes back to within a goal, making it 6-5 on a goal by Sean Harcroft, Nielsen closes out the scoring with an empty net, unassisted goal to complete his first of 2 career NHL hat tricks. Islanders go on to win this one 7-5. Chad Johnson with 26 saves. But for our Islanders' birthday of the day, Franz Nielsen, he had the hat trick. He's a +2. He scored the game winner, and he had 6 shots on goal, which led the team. No other Islanders player in this one had more than 3. So Franz Nielsen, the Great Dane, shootout specialist, he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. And I am this is a busy, important offseason. We'll keep you up to date on all the critical developments. It's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Everydayers, we are back on Monday. If there's big news over the weekend, we will perhaps do at least a 1-minute video, if not a full bonus episode. But barring that, we're back on Monday. We'll hopefully have the latest on the GM search and any other pertinent news about the team. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.